Why do people go bald?
Why are baboons' bums red?
What's a light year? Why do leaves go brown in the autumn? Why do monkeys like bananas? Why do some things glow in the dark? Why do animals not understand humans? Why do my receipts fade after a year?
Don't know the answer? Ask the Naked Scientists.
Hello, welcome to this week's edition of Ask the Naked Scientists with Dave Ansell and with me, Matt Jamison. We'll start off with a bit of news that you've got, I believe.
Yes, might have heard the story recently that conventional light bulbs are being outlawed virtually in the EU.
They're being phased out, aren't they?
Yeah, they're trying to discourage you from using them, so you use some of these compact fluorescents, which are more efficient.
They look really ugly, though, don't they?
They're kind of ugly.
Yeah.
People moan that they take a long time to turn on, especially when it's cold, because you've got actually some mercury vapour in there and it's got to evaporate and it takes a while to warm up. But there's a professor in Cambridge, just down the road, who's coming up with what might be the next thing after that. You may have come across LEDs.
Yes.
Often they're little coloured lights in stereos.
There's a couple here, look. They're flashing while we talk.
Around.
Yeah.
Indeed. And the more modern ones are the white ones, which you might have as bike lights and some modern torches. Problem is they're actually really quite expensive still. To get a white LED, and they're sort of like 80, 90 pence each, which they're not very powerful. And if you want to actually light a room with them, it's going to cost you an absolute fortune. So Professor Colin Humphreys down the road has worked out a way around this problem. The problem is that you've got to use a material called gallium nitride to make them out of, and you've got to grow that on something. Normally, so far up till now, the only thing they can grow it on is sapphire, because if you try and grow it on silicon, which is a dirt cheap thing which all computers are made out of, you heat it up to 1,000 degrees, you grow the gallium nitride. As it cools, the gallium nitride shrinks quicker than the silicon, and it cracks all over the place, and you just got a mess. And so you have to use sapphire, which unsurprisingly is rather expensive, costing thousands of quid for every, sort of probably tens of thousands of pounds for every wafer which you're going to grow the stuff on. But he's come up with a way, if you put a layer of something called aluminium gallium nitride in between the silicon and the gallium nitride, it'll just about grow all right. And so should be able to knock out the white LEDs far, far cheaper.
How long is this going to take him? Because we need them now.
We do need them now.
Like yesterday.
He's just started a project with a company up in County Durham to actually start making these things. Right. I think it's probably a couple of years until he starts making them, and then at least a couple more before they get cheap enough to actually turn up in your house.
How do they become cheaper? I mean, what's the actual science of becoming cheaper? Is it demand?
A lot of it's it costs a certain amount to build a factory, and it costs a bit more to build a factory 10 times the size, but not 10 times as much.
Right, yeah. And
slowly, you also engineers look at something and optimise everything they discover. Actually, you don't need those 5 steps, which take ages and are expensive, if we do these other 2, which are far easier. Most of it's producing lots of things, and some of it's just time and working out ways to get round expensive things.
So these LED lights, could they eventually phase out the ugly-looking things we're all being told to use to save energy now?
Probably. In theory, you can get them more efficient than a compact fluorescent light bulb, and you can certainly tune what colour they are, so you don't get some of the strange colour effects you get with compact fluorescents. And they turn on immediately. So that's one thing which everyone moans about, and it would certainly solve that problem.
And, of course, in 10 years' time, we'll all be saying, what was the 100-watt, the 60-watt?
Yeah, I would have thought so.
Would these LEDs not have wattages?
They would have wattages, but it's about 1/10 of the amount.
Right,
so I mean, if normal compact fluorescent's about 1/7 of the amount of a normal light bulb. So.
Wow. Fascinating stuff. It's always fascinating stuff when you come in. Now, the question comes in from Bob in Colchester, Dave. You ready for this?
Okay.
Trains have got steel wheels. How much of the wheel is on the track point of contact? And how do they generate the friction to make the train move?
Exact numbers of what area is in contact in a steel wheel, I couldn't give you. It's very small. It's certainly probably only a few square millimetres, if that. It's basically because steel is very, very hard stuff, and so it would be wheels round, the trail's approximately flat, so it's the area of contact is going to be to do with how much the wheel can distort the track. So it's going to be very tiny, far, far less than a equivalent wheel made out of rubber or whatever. How can it produce enough friction to push a train along? A lot of friction, it works in a way which Isaac Newton worked out, which is that the amount of frictional force you can get is proportional to the area which is touching and the pressure which is being applied over that area. So if you make the area smaller, if you've got the same weight of train, the same force going down, the pressure is going to increase. So the friction should be the same. So it doesn't matter what area of steel is touching the rails, because if the area gets smaller, then you've got more force over a smaller area, so more pressure. So the amount of friction per unit area is greater, so it actually cancels out. So you get the same friction, whatever the area, because you've got the same force pushing down. Friction is quite complicated. It works like that quite often when things are sitting still. When they start sliding, all hell breaks loose and everything gets more complicated. Normally friction's less when you're sliding than when you're stationary. If you've probably noticed this, all the car programs, if you brake and your wheels start skidding in the car, you're supposed to take your foot off the brake and let the wheels catch up with the road again and then apply the brake again slowly, because you get more friction when the surface of the wheels is actually stationary on the floor than when it's sliding.
We hope that's answered your question, Bob in Colchester. And Paul is on the phone. Hello, Paul. Whereabouts are you tonight?
Buckingham or Gorcut, just outside thereof.
Oh, lovely to hear from you. And your questions about LED lights. You're through to Dr. Dave.
Yeah, I'm curious about this. You're talking about growing, obviously, the crystals required on a substrate, which traditionally is on sapphire, because it's expensive. Is it just restricted to the white LEDs, or could we grow red, green and blue ones on a traditional substrate that doesn't involve the use of expensive minerals such as sapphire, and then bund them all together in clusters and get an artificial white light and use a diffuser to make it look reasonably white to the user?
You certainly can make red, green, yellow LEDs using without using gallium nitride. I think gallium arsenide was quite a common material that was used for LEDs.
Semiconductors are similar.
Yeah, slightly different properties, but you couldn't get the blue until very recently.
Just because it's doped to something, I'm guessing.
I think what's called basically the band gap, which is the bigger you've got electrons, and there's in certain substances they can have two different energies, and the gap between the two and the bigger the gap, the bluer the light you can produce.
Right.
And I don't think the band gap was big enough in gallium arsenide to make blue light. Also, I think the energy in the blue light tended to blow it apart. So basically so much energy in blue light that it actually would damage crystal structure.
Makes sense, because higher frequency or shorter wavelength.
Yeah. So yes, you could. I mean, in many ways, they're trying to make LED TVs. You actually get LED displays. There's one of them at King's Cross Station.
That's the organic ones they're talking about, isn't it?
They want it for monitors. They do have displays with like conventional LEDs. Like I think there's one at King's Cross Station. I don't know if you've seen it. Great sort of 10 or 20 foot diagonal display.
That's all LEDs. Those are orange LEDs, aren't they?
There's little groups of three, sort of red, green, blue.
Yeah, is that to light the TFT panel, or is that actually producing the image actively?
I think that's actually producing the image. It's very low resolution because each pixel's sort of 10 millimetres across or whatever, but if you're a long way away, that's fine. If you're trying to get it onto an actual monitor, then the LED ones, they're talking about using plastics to make the LEDs instead.
So you build the whole lot as one lump, a whole panel?
Yeah.
Okay.
You sort of inkjet print it on.
Right.
But yes, I mean, in theory you could. I guess it would be expensive, and you've got to sort of move all the parts which are made in different processes all into one place to make a white thing with a diffuser on the front. And if nothing else, just moving things around with robots is probably relatively expensive compared...
On that scale, yeah.
If you're trying to make millions of them.
Yeah. Do you still have a series resistor with LEDs like we learnt traditionally in electronics? Because you can't put one big one, otherwise the first one that lights up sinks all the current and it goes bang and the rest stay dark.
Yes, LEDs have got, unlike a normal resistor whereby the higher the voltage, the more current you get through. And so if you want to put more current in, you've got to put higher voltage in, and it's very stable because you put a bit more voltage in, you get a bit more current.
Yeah.
LEDs, that has a period whereby you apply more voltage and you get no current at all.
Current,
then all of a sudden it's got almost no resistance, and so you just got slightly more current in that, you get more voltage up, you get a huge current, and you fry the device. And LEDs are still fundamentally like that. Actually, the voltage, that first voltage is different with different colours. Things with shorter wavelengths, red LEDs have got a lower voltage than blue, which need a higher voltage because there's more energy in each lump of light, each photon.
Okay, so you could have pairs of them turned back to back, so you can light on both halves of the cycle, presumably, if it's in a.
You'd probably have if you're trying to plug LEDs into the mains, you'd have some kind of clever electronics to play with the voltage. Because the intrinsic voltage of an LED, even its blue light's about 4 volts, whereas mains 240 volts. So you need something to convert the voltage.
But you can use both halves of the cycle.
You could use both halves of the cycle. You're still talking far more volts than you'd want. So you need something, either transformer or some clever piece of active electronics to convert the voltage to one which you need.
So in conclusion, is it worth it? Because the manufacturing cost, and if it's about the environment, I'm not sure we need to concern that much, but different argument. The end of life of these things, in gallium arsenide, there's some nasty compounds using it. You've got, at some point they die after X years.
Yeah.
Is it worth it as a net cost?
Gallium arsenide, there's very, very little gallium arsenide in each LED. I think just from the white ones, Colin Humphreys was talking about on a sort of 12-inch wafer, you can get 150,000 LEDs. And if you're growing gallium nitride on a layer of silicon, then you only got, for a start, there's no arsenic in it, so there's not a lot. It's not less poisonous than gallium arsenide.
But still very little, not to worry about.
So, not enough to worry about. Far less than the mercury in a compact fluorescent.
Oh, yes, the other thing, mercury in compact fluorescence, no one's thought about that, have they?
People do think about it. I think at the moment there's probably, it's always a balance of two evils, and I think at the moment the energy which conventional light bulb uses is more evil than the mercury which a compact fluorescent will release at the end of its life.
That's what we're sort of meant to believe. That's a good answer, no, I can live with that. Good.
Cheers.
Are you happy with that, Paul?
I'll have to do for one night, wouldn't it? I've got to take a deep breath now.
Thanks for calling.
Okay, thanks very much.
Cheers now. There's a couple coming in here. First of all, we all miss Concorde, and, well, maybe not all of us, but a bit of a broad brush there, but some of us miss Concorde. And Mark wants to know, if you went on Concorde, you were travelling twice the speed of sound. If that is the case, how would you be able to communicate? How do people communicate on Concorde?
It's an interesting question. The simple answer is that you're not going at twice the speed of sound compared to the air around you. So the air in Concorde is moving at twice the speed of sound, almost exactly the same speed as you. So it just travels. So you can talk to someone else as if I'm talking to you, Mark.
Yeah.
If we put the air in a box and we made it move at twice the speed of sound, 10 times the speed of sound, it doesn't really matter because the air is stationary compared to us, so sound will move normally. The interesting thing is what would happen is if you stuck your head out the window and started shouting.
Apart from breaking your neck.
It wouldn't be a good idea. I think it's probably not one to experiment.
We don't recommend you try this at home.
Yes, don't try this next time you travel on a supersonic aircraft. Because if you stick your head out the window and shouted and someone was in front of the plane, and then you were heading towards them, then you'd get there before the sound did. Because then you're trying to shout in air which is stationary, and you're shouting and you're moving faster than the speed of sound. So all of your the shouting can only move forward at the speed of sound. So you would actually overtake the sound you make, and you'd be shouting. You go past, and then they might hear you later if they could hear you underneath all the jet engines. Yeah. In fact, this had an interesting effect with the V2 bombs during the war.
Oh, right.
The big rockets which the Germans launched at London. Apparently they made a really strange sound because they're basically a big ballistic rocket. They get launched up, then come down supersonically and come into London. So if you were near where one hit, you'd hear the explosion, and then you'd hear a strange backward zoop noise of them coming down through the air because they'd get there first, and then the sound would catch up later.
That's very clever.
It wasn't necessarily the reason why the Germans built them.
No, and we don't recommend you try that either.
No, don't go.
This is all theoretical science we're talking about. Please don't, start putting your fairy balls together or anything. Ronnie Maxwell says, I held a CD up to our kitchen light to try and catch the spectrum. This is supposed to be white light, but is it the same as daylight? I saw red, orange, yellow, green, magenta, cyan, blue, or indigo, she says, on violet. I understood that you couldn't see magenta in a spectrum.
You shouldn't be able to see what true magenta is. Magenta is essentially what happens if you take away green light from white light, sort of greeny colours from white light. So it's a mixture of red and blue. You can have in the spectrum, there's a whole infinite number of different colours. They sort of range from red at the long wavelength end through oranges, yellows, greens, turquoisey colours. Then you get blues and some indigo-y violet colours. And the indigo-y violets are quite dark, quite bluey sort of purples. Now, you shouldn't be able to make a magenta, which is a mixture of red and blue. Your eyes have got three different sensors in them: a red sensor, a green sensor, and a blue sensor. The way you feel, the way you actually understand colour is quite complicated, and I've got into trouble with this before. But to a simple approximation, you've got three sensors. Some people seem to have four, but no one's quite sure whether they see the world in a different way. Other people have only two, and then they're what you call colourblind. If you haven't got a red one and a green one, then you can't tell the difference between red and green. So you're red-green colourblind. Some people are also missing the blue, and so they wouldn't be able to see blue colours, but will be able to tell the difference between red and green.
Is that genetic?
That is genetic. You're basically you've got the three different colour sensors are actually three different pigments in different cells in the retina in the back of your eye. And some people don't have the gene to make one of the proteins, to make one of the pigments which absorb the light, and so they're just missing one of the light sensors. Right. In fact, a lot of mammals are red-green colourblind. Primates and a few others. It's a mutation from the. I think green is a mutation from the red, or vice versa. And so dogs can't tell a red ball in a green grass very well because they can't tell the difference. But magenta should be a mixture of blue and should be triggering both the blue sensor in the back of your eye and the red. And there's no single wavelength, no single colour of rainbow light which can do that. I would have thought if you're seeing magenta in a CD, it might be that you're getting overlap. Because you're actually, if you look in a CD, you see, if you're especially looking quite close to a light bulb, you see a rainbow. But what you actually see is it looks like a rainbow. What you're actually seeing is different pictures of the light which you're looking at. Right. But each colour ends up in a slightly different place. It's a strange kind of reflection. It's because there's two different depths. You've got two reflections because you've got pits on the CD. You've got the top of the pits and the bottom of the pits, and you get a different reflection off the top. You get two reflections, one off the top and one off the bottom.
Which is why if you wave it, they go different.
And if you get the light's a wave, and you get two different waves coming off it. He's looking at one now, and they're two very, very close together. You shouldn't be able to get red and blue with a single wavelength of light mixture to make magenta with a single wavelength of light, but you could be able to do it. You might be able to do it because the two images are overlapping. The way a CD gives you the different colours is that you're getting two reflections, one off the bottom of the pits, one off the top, and light's a wave, so you get two reflections, two waves coming off. And in some directions, the two reflections, for a certain colour, in some directions, the two reflections will add together and make it brighter. In others, they'll cancel each other out and make it darker. But the angle at which that happens is different for different colours. So the image of the light appears in different places for different colours because it changes at a different angle.
We hope, Ronnie, that's answered your question. Joanne has a question for us, and good evening to you.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm very well. Whereabouts are you calling from tonight, Joanne?
I'm calling from near Norwich.
Oh, right.
A place called Saul, if you want the honest truth.
You're through to Dr. Dave. What's your question tonight?
Well, but my question is really about these horrible little bulbs we're supposed to be having. I find they don't give a lot of light, and plus the fact, I thought I got rid of my migraines and headaches and whatnot, but since I've been using these, I've got them back again. Is there any reason why?
They do flash more than a conventional light bulb. Because normal electricity, AC electricity, alternating current, is going backwards and forwards at 50 times a second. And a normal light bulb will actually flash at 50 times a second, a conventional one. But basically, when you put more current in it, it heats up a bit more, it gets a bit brighter, then it takes a while to cool down again. By that point, you've got more current coming back again, so it doesn't flash very much. A fluorescent light bulb will turn on and off quicker, so the flash is definitely more significant than an ordinary light bulb. I have heard other people having problems with sort of migraines and due to the flashing. It's faster than
it does
you can
actually
see.
make it very difficult. And today, for instance, there hasn't been a lot of light with me, so I've got my lights on, and it has made it worse. And there's not enough light even to try and read with glasses and whatnot. In the end, I give up.
I think sometimes, definitely with the flashing, I think there are different versions of the compact fluorescent light bulbs. And I wouldn't say for certain, but I think they have got better over the years. And the very cheap ones, which you can get for sort of 50p in a supermarket, are probably the older versions. And definitely the newer ones do turn on quicker.
I don't try the cheaper version. Thank you, bye.
Joanne there on the phone. And another question, just going back to the CD situation, Dave. From Nick Hall from Alberta in Canada, who says, when I copy a scratch CD to a new writable compact disc, all of its own material, of course, the new CD seems to work perfectly, doesn't skip or have corrupt data. Why would the CD burner be able to read information that my CD player is not able to? And as a sub-question to that, sometimes when I dub things onto my iTunes or whatever, sort of hard disk you're using, it eliminates those skips. How does it do that?
A CD has actually got some quite sophisticated what's called error-correcting codes in it. It doesn't just write all of the data once. It actually adds some extra data in there. So if you've got sort of all of the audio is converted into numbers when you digitize something, and then so the amount of the sound pressure. So basically, the sound is converted into a whole string of numbers. And then you could just put that straight on the CD. But then if something got scratched, you'd have a hole in the numbers, you'd have a gap, it would jump. And that's all that definitely old-fashioned CD players can deal with. However, actually there's extra information in there which a computer can use to reconstitute, which put it back, use, if there's a hole, it can use that extra information to mend that hole. So up to a certain amount, if it's too scratched, there isn't enough information there, even with the extra bits.
It becomes a coaster.
It turns into a coaster. But there is a stage whereby a conventional CD player won't be able to play it, but a computer, or in fact the ones you get in cars, because they can use this extra information which is there to put it back together again and fix the gaps. And then it can rewrite the CD, make it fine. In fact, they were trying to take some rather, I don't know whether you call them unpleasant or not, music companies were using this in order to stop people copying them in the computers. Because what they'd do is they'd put the first set of information completely correct, but then the extra error-correcting stuff, they'd put garbage in it. So the computer would get really confused because it would try and be using error-correcting data at the end to fix the audio, which wasn't broken in the first place, and it would actually cause complete havoc with it. And it would say the CD doesn't compute. And so if you tried to copy it or play it on a computer, it wouldn't work. Or in fact, it wouldn't work if you played it in a car stereo either. But if you played it on a conventional bog standard audio CD player, it isn't intelligent enough to try and fix the problems, so it would play straight through. I think after a while, because so many people play CDs in computers and cars, they had so much of an uproar about it that everyone, they gently shelved the product.
And is it the case, while we're on CDs and music, that they've always been able to write data on both sides, but just haven't? It's normally like a sort of greatest hits or something like that. You now have the whole thing on one CD.
There's no fundamental reason why you couldn't. A CD is basically, conventional CD, are 2 bits of plastic sandwiching a very thin layer of aluminium, and that aluminium's been stamped on a stamp, and so it's got lots of pits in it, and those pits have got the information. Right. There's no fundamental reason why you couldn't put another layer of plastic and then another sheet of aluminium, and which you can read from the other side. So there's no fundamental reason why not. It may only have got cheap recently, or they may only have bothered recently.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Remember, you can send The Naked Scientists your questions by email. chris@thenakedscientists.com is the address to write to. And if you want to find out more about The Naked Scientists, then drop by our website, nakedscientists.com.
The Naked Scientists are sponsored by the Wellcome Trust, the EPSRC and UK Fast. For more information, look us up online at nakedscientists.com.